right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. We are live streaming here on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And today we're going to talk about mitigating catastrophes with Kensu. So before I bring up our guest and talk to you about what we're going to talk about, I want to sort of let you know what to expect for the session. We are having a fun giveaway again, as the Dedicated Show tends to do. Today, we're giving away 2 memberships for the Dedicated Inner Circle, which is essentially access to some private live shows and over 10 different courses. So if you want to enter the raffle to win, all you have to do is type in hashtag Kensu into the comments. If you're joining us on any of the platforms that I just mentioned, we will be able to pull in all the comments across those platforms. We will select one winner at the halfway point of the session using this automatic raffle feature, and then one more winner towards the end of the session. So make sure you stick around. All right. Today, we're talking to Andy Petrella from Cansu, and we are also taking questions throughout the session. So definitely, as you have questions on the topic of data observability, make sure to drop those into the comments. It really helps us have a more engaging session when our audience members are participating. And if you've been to the show before, we try to take as many questions from the live audience as possible. So today we're talking about mitigating data catastrophes with data observability driven development. We may or not refer to this as DODD as the session goes on, but just so you know, it's in the ticker below if you forget what DODD stands for. That's what we've got it over there. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our speaker here, Andy Petrella. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Kate. Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, awesome to have you here. So I am here based in New Jersey, and I know you're in Belgium, enjoying great Belgian waffles once in a while. And so let's start with that. How's Belgium doing? How's the weather over there?
The weather, I mean, it's Belgium, right? So it's like a weird country. The weather is kind of interesting. So we have snow, sometimes we don't have. So it's like trying to find its way at the moment.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let's get into this. For those who are not familiar with you, let people know, who is Andy? What do you do? What has your journey looked like so far?
So I'm Andy Petrella. So I'm coming from a academic sector, let's say, so background, so in mathematics and then computer science, where I specialize in something that I actually like for years, which is geospatial data analysis. So really a specific analysis on satellite images and stuff like this, until I discovered the technology that I loved in 2010 for many years, which was Apache Spark, which is nowadays like a very known tool. And during the years, I've been using Spark as a data miner, data scientist, whatever you would call that. Actually, I have created also a tool, the Spark Notebook, an open source tool that has been used for many years. Now it's not really maintained in a way, but it was a great moment for the Spark Notebook because we had a large community and large community of Scala and Spark users, where I started doing some advisory in the US, especially in the Silicon Valley, where I gave a lot of talks and gave a lot of training and workshop about how the heck data and notebooks and Spark and big data and AI can play all together. And that's the time where actually I started Kensu after all these learnings with the people.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, what was it about Spark that lit a spark for you in this field?
Indeed. Actually, when I was working with geospatial data, satellite images and features and stuff like this is what like big data before the day, right? Because one image is like multiple terabytes by itself, right? And back then we had no distributed computing whatsoever. And I said to myself, well, we have a plenty of different systems here to handle this data, but what exists out there that can simplify my job as a data miner, data scientist with geospatial data? And I was looking at some stuff that I discovered to be distributed computing. And I said, look, I'm doing some Java and Python, and I discovered Scala and said, oh, the mix of both was interesting to me. And that's how I got there.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. So you were just getting to the point where you started Kensu. So I think this is a good time for us to talk about what exactly is Kensu and how long has the company been around?
What is Cansu? So Cansu is really the company that I had to create when I discovered, when I was doing this advisory. I worked with many big corporations in the Valley, like those that were using the Spark Notebook, like Netflix was using it, for instance, right? And I discovered that with notebooks and with the capacity of nowadays, we have to create data processes, application pipelines, and everything. I said, okay, there will be a problem, which is having a kind of trust of what we deliver, right? We can run Spark, we can run SQL or whatsoever. We run in production, so we deploy in productions. They will be automated. They will be running, whatever. How do we actually keep this trust? How do we actually keep the knowledge about what has been delivered? And Kensu is actually the resultants of this kind of brainstorming and advisory I was doing actually back then with these companies. So that's why actually Kensu stands for Ken. Ken means actually in Scottish mainly knowledge, right? So knowing things about data deliveries and everything, knowing what has been done with the data, for instance. And Su stands for sustainability, right?
Okay.
Sustainability for, when you scale, right? Making sure that the knowledge on the data and the knowledge about the status of the data remains, visible, easy, and so forth, right?
Okay.
And yeah, so we've been around for almost 5 years now, working on this thing that I had, looking for back then. And nowadays we claim this as data observability. It has been for me data activity management. It has been a data intelligence management, and I think observability is the right word because it's in a way, a mix of IT and data.
That makes sense. And you've got a couple of your friends here. I see Ravit saying
Hey,
hello,
Ravi.
in here to say hello, and Joe's here saying
Joe.
what's up. I know Joe recently had his own session on the same topic of data observability we were just chatting about. So interesting to hear this, and I'm glad you've been able to establish a solution that you were looking for, right?
Mm.
And data observability, right? To the layman, it sounds like observing data or taking a look at data, but it's got to be more than that, right? So maybe let's get into the topic of what really is data observability.
Yeah. In order to understand, I mean, to define the observability, I like to take a little bit of height or a little bit of and seeing it from the sky in a way, right? So for
Yeah.
me, data observability is more like an ability of a data system, an ability of a data system that so that it can provide information about its own behavior. So the data system provide information about its behavior, some so that a external observer, someone from the external of the data system, can understand what is going on. So what is the internal state of data system, right? So we have a data system providing information so that someone from the outside world, let's say, can understand, okay, this is what is going on there. Maybe I should change it. Maybe I need to update it. Maybe I need to upgrade it, right? It's not
Mhm.
only looking at the data, it's really understanding what is happening in the data system overall.
Right, right. And that brings us to my next question to define, since we're talking about how do we mitigate data catastrophes. Let's also drop in a definition for what really is a data catastrophe, and then we'll really get into how all your the past 5 years of work, or actually more than 5 years of work, has culminated into this new method called DODD.
Yeah. Um, well, so Datastrophe is like dedicated, right? So it's a combination of data and catastrophe, and there are several known names that have been given to this kind of concept, which is dark data, by the from the book that John Hand has written, "Why I Don't Know Matters." What you
Hmm.
don't know matters, for instance,
Yeah.
or you have also excuse me, data cascade in the book, in the report that has written and delivered recently Google on data cascade in high stake AI, right? Basically, a data catastrophe is a catastrophe that happens because of data. And it's sometimes we do the shortcut like a catastrophe is bad data quality. It's not really that. The data quality, of course, is a component of facing catastrophe, because maybe you missed a lot of data, or the data is badly formatted, whatever, right? But there are also cases where the data which is good can create catastrophe, because especially when you do AI, it can be biased, or AI can be biased, right? And you receive the right data, but because the way you have learned initially and the data is changing in production because you had a sample which is not representing the truth, right? Then it's an example, right? Then you can create it. Then you can say, but maybe the sample is not good, right? But the data is good. The quality is good. The sample may not, but the data is good, right? And they're always like this.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I'm almost wondering, would cybersecurity or like security of data, would that also fall under data catastrophe?
It's a good question. So security is a way to prevent things to happen, right? So within a way, catastrophe should be avoided, right? So it's kind of there, but in a way you want to secure your environment, right? It's not really about only data security, is about managing the risks of the usage of the data, right? So it's a little bit more than security, is really managing the risks that you are taking any time that you are making a decision based on the data. And we've done it, right? So am I taking the right decision based on the data that I'm seeing, right?
Right. Yeah, got it. And Dustin is here to add that it's this is definitely something he would like to avoid. Whatever data catastrophe is, it sounds like something he wants to avoid. And I know that's something that Kensu is working hard at helping other organizations to help mitigate, at least, because sometimes we can't fully avoid any some of these catastrophes from happening, but we can at least mitigate them. So wanted to ask, sort of what clients does Cansu work with in terms of, is there specific industries that you're focused on, sectors, regions, and then how do you actually help those clients?
Yeah, in terms of users, right? So customers that are actually, at the right level, maturity level, let's say, because there is this thing that needs to be considered too, right? So what is the maturity level that you need to have in order to, really embrace data observability, let's say, right? So when you see the clear benefits right away is when you have to scale, of course, with the number of usage you're doing, because it's not related to a sector, it's not related to a geo footprint or whatever. It's really related to what are your ambitions with the data that you have at hand or you want to capture, right? So it's almost related to the ability at some point that you have to deliver something with the data. So if you're getting started with your data platform, for instance, you are building the few blocks and then you start ingesting some data into your platform, and you have a data engineering team that will start consuming or build data products, for instance, on top of the data that is incoming, for instance, this is the right time, right? And this can happen in small companies, big, large companies, because anything that will be delivered on data has a meaning, right? So you want to take a decision which has a business impact, might that be for your users or internally, and you want to make sure that, these decisions are taken accordingly and are reliable in a way, right? So that's typically where we see the value of data observability. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the size of the company doesn't matter as much as the actual use case of where you want to mitigate these data catastrophes. We've got several questions coming in the comments, so I'll take one from Joseph. I guess he's trying to find maybe more clarity on the actual scope of what is included under data observability. So he notes, security, data usage, data availability, data quality. What would you, maybe to rephrase what you said earlier in terms of the scope?
Yeah, so because we want to understand, right? Security doesn't really, maybe I'm going too hard, right? But it's not there to helping understanding what is going on and take a decision, right?
Yeah.
So security is a decision, right? So you block or you let it go, right? So really data observability is providing information for the data system. That means And why do you provide, what the data system has to provide information? Because you want to understand the state of the system. And a system can be a data pipeline. Let's take a data pipeline. You have multiple applications that are producing intermediate data sets, right, that can be reused afterwards, right? And this pipeline is producing also a final result that can be used into a report, right?
Right.
So why do we want to have data observability there? Is not to ensure that the data is only correctly shaped because you look at the emails and they look fine, right? You want to observe how this pipeline is behaving, right? So what is the data being consumed and produced by each steps, right? And how are these actually created? That means that you have the lineage information from within the application so that you know what is the application that has actually created this data set, which is intermediate data, etc., etc. So one, the lineage. But the lineage is not for the governance part. Why do we need the lineage? Is in understand how the data are being connected by the different applications. Then we need to have the information about what is the profile of the data being consumed and produced at the application level. Why? Because we want to create some trust around each application in order to have a full trust of the pipeline, right? So that's why the profile, might it be the schema, might it be the distribution, might it be the number of rows, null values or whatsoever. All these things that an application has encoded, might it be an SQL or it might be a Python code, whatever. But when you read data with Python, you have some assumptions. I'm reading some data. I'm assuming that I will not have any nulls in this column whatsoever. I will have like 5% of null value that I'm dropping, right? But what we want to do with data observability is detect that at some point you don't drop too many rows so that your report is wrong. And what you want to do with the data observability platform then is to find out where the heck is the first application that has dropped too many information from my data, right?
Yes.
And you want to switch directly to this application and say, okay, this is the application. It's a Python code, which is on GitHub. This is the version. Maybe the rule to drop the data is too harsh, right? Or maybe the data is wrong, but at least you know where the root cause is, which is not data always. It can be also, and it can be really often also the application itself.
Right. We can't always blame the data. Sometimes it's the technology or the process or something else that ruins it for us. So yeah, thank you for explaining that. When you were talking about, maybe building the profiles and all that, who are the individuals who are actually involved in the entire process of data observability and also building those profiles? Is it data engineers, data scientists, or other?
I would say, largely the people involved in data observability are the people who are worried about what will be done with the data. Right. So, and actually I'm including producers and consumers, right?
Okay.
And you can think about if you want to generalize, like, let's say the data team and the business team in a way, right? But actually everything is entangled. So it's not always clear. So, for instance, data engineers, so I am going one level down, data engineers would be actually interested in knowing when the data that they are producing is becoming less relevant than it used to be, right? So they want to have some notification about when is this exact moment, right? And understanding why, right? Yeah. From the other side, as a user, we want to make sure that the data we consume is readable, right? With regard to my constraints, because it's important to know that, for me at least, and I think this is happening everywhere, data quality, or let's say reliability of the data, can be at the same time good and bad for the same data. Some people may say, yeah, this is good enough data. The other one would say, no, this is totally crappy data, because they're not using in the same way. So that means that from the producer perspective, they have to understand how the different users, right, are seeing the data, right? And from the user perspective, they have to understand what are the constraints, what are the level, right, that the producer are capable of providing with regard to the data. That's why it's a little bit of mix. So I would say that who produce the data observability information can be both, but mostly engineers. And who are the consumers? probably both, but essentially the business users.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that explanation. So it sounds similar to what most companies, I guess, might refer to as data quality management, right? So maybe let's just spend another minute sort of telling the audience the actual difference between data quality assurance and making sure that the quality of the data is good versus data observability.
Yeah. Data quality management can be helped with data observability. Data observability is something which is real time, that helps in figure out where some pipelines are getting wrong and some data may not be usable anymore, which is of course really tightly coupled with quality. But also you can do more with the data observability than only quality monitoring, because thanks to data observability, one information that is interesting is the connection that exists between the data and what is the purpose of one with the lineage, right? What is the purpose of the data being used in different contexts? So you kind of create some extra knowledge around how the data is being used in the application. So it can share information with data catalogs too, not for the data quality angle, but saying, look, actually, you know that this data is being used from recommendation engines and whatsoever, right? So it has some interest, so it can be scored in a way, which is a little bit perpendicular to data definition then, right? Because you define a data, and for me, a data is defined by its usage, not by its content only, right? So it is our information, which is the context. So coming back to data quality management, yes, it can participate to it, but data quality management is something specific, right? So you want your data to be of good quality in a way. Good quality means that you need to respect all the different constraints of the users, right? But you need to know what those constraints are, right? And this is what observability can do. They can tell you, look, this user needs this kind of constraint, this user needs that and that and that and that.
Okay, yeah, I see. So basically data observability can help maybe improve or help support the efforts of data quality management, but I definitely see the difference. That's very helpful. I know we're going to talk about DODD, so I do want to sort of get into how you came up with the data observability driven development. We're going to call this DODD for short. Before we do that, I just want to remind folks that we do have a giveaway. So all you have to do to participate is type in hashtag Kensu, and we're going to announce the first winner after Andy tells us all about DODD. So Andy, let's get into it. How did you come up with the method? What is it really for those who have not heard of this?
Yeah. So how I came up with it, because as I said, so I've been a data engineer, I've been a data scientist, whatever you want to call it, right? And I've advised a lot of companies where we have faced this kind of, damn it, my data is not right, so I don't get it on the right time, I don't have enough values, the data I'm getting is not complete, not correct, whatever. And let's say the knee-jerk solution that we always had, and I had myself, right, is that, okay, I'm going to create some script that is going to check the data continually, right? It's like a knee-jerk, right? So basically, it's like the instant solution. So I'm going to add something else. So I'm going to add some more burden on my end in order to create another application, something else that will actually validate my data. I say, okay, so I've done this, and I tried to push it, and I said, and I discovered that, well, actually, this increases the amount of work that you have to do in order to check whatever you do. Yeah. You have to manage another application. You have to manage another system in order to do these things. And when I have to change my application, which is producing the data, might that be a business rule or the frequency at which I'm updating it, I have to also update this thing. So actually, it was almost going against all the principles of good IT management. When the IT management that I mean, most probably DevOps, right? Okay. DevOps, where we have started our journey. So I try to mix them. I see my status at data, and I say, look, what did we do in IT in the last years in order to circumvent similar events where the application is down. So what have we done in order to figure this out, right? What we've done, and I've been there at the time where we did this, right? We have introduced unit testing. right? Unit testing and logging, right? Both almost at the same time. So logging was was there already, but anyway. And I remember that engineers would tell me, look, I mean, I've been hired to write production code, not test code, right? So they are dedicated for this, so it's not gonna work. So we have to write a code that will go in production. And eventually in the last years, of course, unit testing became actually a best practice, right? In order for the developer to create some certainty, some trust around the applications. So that one, and the logs was there in order to figure out what will go wrong later on. So when you mix these things together, so I said to myself, look, why don't we do the exact same thing, but with the data? So when you receive some data, right, why don't we check at this moment in production the constraints that you have on the data? Pretty much like you would check that from a HTTP request you receive that the value you receive is not null or zero because you cannot divide it, right? Then you raise an exception, you return an error. Why don't we do the same thing with data? That means that you're driving, in a way, the way you're using the data with some observability. You create some information about the way you use the data during your application development. So when you think about your business cases, and you produce extra information that will help you later on, to figure out what's happening, and you will help you also later on when you're going to change your applications to figure out if it's still correct or no. So it's by mixing, best practices in IT, which is logging, testing, and continuous validation, right? So making things contextual, synchronized, so you don't check that the value is not null later on. So you do it when you receive the value, and you can validate it in production with the logs and the metrics. So that's basically done, right? So you actually do your data observability when you do your development, done.
And you don't wait until everything is launched in production and then you're like, oh, let me go check on my data. So you do it at the same time as you're developing it.
Yes. So an example, right? So a true example, right? So I've been there, and this is an example that used to drive the first steps in Kensu. Is I receive some data, I consume a data that comes from a database, whatever, and I'm looking at the data and say, okay, I cannot have any addresses with null values in there, right? And what I do is that because I don't have that many, I actually clean the data that has some null values from the addresses, and then I pass along, and then I would transform my data in order to create some 360 view of my users or whatsoever. But the thing is, I'm assuming at the moment I'm dropping the data that there are not too many addresses, right? And when I drop the data is still correct after, right? So it's still enough information whatsoever, right? So when I introduce that, so the thing is that you still drop the values, but you log how many null values you've dropped, right? And then you know how many values you have dropped over time. And at some point, if you drop, let's say, 2% of your data and you bump to 20% of your data, then you know that your report later on will be wrong because you have way less data and so forth, right?
Right.
And it's even worse when you're actually imputing the data, when you do some KNN or whatsoever in the data and you're creating kind of fake value, and you randomly pick, let's say, the distance, the K in the K nearest neighbor, right? You want to understand what will be the impact of applying this imputation onto your data.
Right. So I guess Cansu helps provide that documentation, right? The steps that you've taken, like dropping values or imputing.
So yeah, basically it's a kind of instrumentation plus checking. So I would do something like this, right? So if the number of the values, right, is more than so many, I stop my job. I stop it. Like I would raise an exception in regular code, I stop my job, right? There is no point of continuing it. But my checks are in the code, not in the tests, right? Which is different.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that. All right. Before we go to further questions, we're going to go ahead and announce our very first winner of the Dedicated Inner Circle membership. So get your drum roll ready. Congratulations to our winner. It always slows down. All right, Vana, congratulations. I will follow up after the session is over. We do still have one membership to give away. So if you're interested, just type in #Kensu, and we're going to do another raffle towards the end of the session. Now, looking at some of the questions coming in, Ravit has a question on DODD. He's just curious, how long did it take you to actually create it? Because I know this is sort of like your baby, right? The whole methodology.
Yeah, it took me, before I started Kensu, it took me 2 years to analyze, how different systems were actually being how problems were being resolved in different sectors, especially IT. What were the different problems that were coming more and more in data? Because it's important to say, I mean, these issues exist for a long time, right? So Datastrophes are not new, of course, right?
Of course.
It's just that we reached 6 years ago already in certain area of the world, especially where I was there in the Valley, right? We reached a certain critical mass, right? So that this kind of errors were actually actually they were easy to see in a way, right? So they were happening more and more, so they became clear to everyone. So I started thinking about what the heck can we do and what can we learn from the past, right? In order to not repeat again the same errors that I've done on myself with creating 10,000 script checking my data at different time and then using too many resources. And then it took as many years in order to create the first prototype of the platform that would do this. And then we keep this idea evolving with the different libraries, because of course DODD has to come with a certain level, a certain number of libraries for Pandas, Python, R, Java, Scala, whatever. And this is something that we are constantly increasing and improving day by day with our customers and users. And by the way, most of them are actually open source on our GitHub repository.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. Where can people find your GitHub repository if they wanted to sort of dig into this?
Yeah, it's on GitHub. So Kensu.io-OSS for open source software. And then you will have the Python library over there, and there will be some Java, Java open tracing library. So for who is interested, for instance, the Kensu Pi library is a monkey patching. So it uses monkey patching in order to add observability right into the Python code that you write, so that all these logs that I was talking about, the profiling, the statistic, the lineage, and everything can be generated automatically when you write some Pandas code or BigQuery, whatever. And the Java library, however, is leveraging open tracing technologies in order to add whatever is important for data observability to be included into the traces and the spans in order to ensure that visibility is also enabled on data.
Okay, thanks. And do you also have documentation around DODD as the method itself somewhere?
Yeah, so on our website at the moment, so there is also the blog, so on kensuio.blog. And I'm currently also writing a book for Riley about data observability. It's a small report. It's gonna be roughly 30 pages. Introduction to data observability, and there will be a few paragraphs on how data observability, because we are hearing a lot about data observability in the last 6 months, I would say. So what is important, this is great, but there is also how the heck do we do this, right? And that's why I dedicated a bit of content to DODD also.
Right. Yeah, I think people are understanding the benefits of data observability, and I think now the question is sort of how do we actually do this? So really cool to hear that you've got a book coming out with O'Reilly. That's awesome. In terms of the links that you were just mentioning, I can share the links with everybody who signed up for the session. So you guys don't have to go hunting for it now. I will send a follow-up email after the session with some of the links that Andy mentioned. So Andy, back to Kensu. What would you say is your vision? Because I know as a founder of a company, it's always sort of, I don't know, it's very personal when it's your own company and you have this vision. So I'd love to just hear what your vision is for, let's say, the next 5 years. Let's make it, in my mind, that's long term. 5 years is very long term.
I mean, I would say data producers, and I can resume it to data engineers, data scientists, whatever. But I want people producing data insights to be able to sleep on their both ears during night. That's
how do you do that? How do you sleep on both ears?
So it's a French proverb, right? So actually in French you would say on dort sur les deux oreilles, which means that you sleep like a baby. You sleep like you can dream, you can sleep on both ears. It's gonna be okay.
Have you
And
slept with a baby in your house before, Andy? Babies don't sleep. It's a terrible experience.
yeah, yeah. So I know that, right? So it's like a fake news for people who wants to actually have babies. No, it's okay. It's gonna be sleep like I have two boys, right? So they're
Okay.
grown up
Okay.
now, so 11 and 6. So I don't have always this problem, but still it can
Yes.
happen.
I'm
So
thinking about the younger years. I have two kids as well, and I remember people said sleep like a baby, and my kids didn't sleep through the night for a very long time. So I'm like,
yeah.
that is definitely false advertisement.
So
Okay, but I
usually
get
sleep
what you're
like a baby
saying.
too, also 30 minutes every 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so, um, so yeah, so basically I want to make sure that it's pretty much like any, DevOps, I would say. So it was meant in order to avoid people being caught overnight and they have no idea what is happening. So they have no feedback from the system whatsoever. They are being yelled at because, yeah, the application is not wrapped or whatever. So this happened with data, right? So this level of anxiety that it exists for people that are delivering data, and I would include AI models too in there, right?
Okay.
So actually it's very high. So the first time you have your users yelling at you, right? The next time, actually the trust in yourself will diminish, like literally to almost zero. Right? So I have to deploy this. I'm not confident anymore. And of
Mm.
course, the trust of the users is down there. But I mean, as a personal individual, not having trust in yourself, right, is something that we have to fight, and that's what I want to fight, basically.
Okay, yeah, I get that. And Dustin had a follow-up question about the book you mentioned earlier. I think you're still writing the book, right? But where can Dustin get a copy once that's done?
Yeah, it's entering production next week, I believe. So it's gonna be out most probably early February.
Okay, wow, that's coming right up. We're already in December. In December, I know that last weeks of December, nothing gets done at all. So
It's gonna be a late gift.
yes, yes, very cool. All right, so you've shared your vision, and I'm assuming right now people are watching the session and they're inspired, and they're probably thinking of ways that they can be involved in either helping you along your vision, your mission. So how can folks get involved?
Oh, I mean, so many different fashion, right? So first there is this open source library, so helping, asking questions, trying it, etc., right? So this is one way that I would love having people involved. Another way is actually in the course of Q1 next year, we're gonna have a freemium version of the application, so they can try it out, so they can experience the full benefits of introducing DOD within the pipelines, within the applications, within their data platform, and so on and so forth, and having feedback about the method, the concept of continuous validation within the CI/CD and stuff like this actually would thrill me, right? Because this is new, right? So basically, we are all discovering, plenty of things that we can do. So I'd like to leverage, the big brains that I have, not in front of me, but they are hidden. But I can see you guys.
Awesome. Yes, and I know there are plenty of ways for folks to contact you if they wanted to either if they had questions, follow-up questions about Kensu. So what would be some of the best ways to contact you?
So of course, LinkedIn, the website. So there is a contact page. You can always reach us out. So there is also a chat box. So we're responding very fast on that. And Twitter. So you can call us on Twitter. You can follow Cansu or me. So it's Nutsap on Twitter. So I can be also very active, not for Twitter Storm. So Tweet Storm, I would avoid them. Probably not just answering, but yeah, I mean, we're very open. So come and talk, basically.
Come and talk to Andy. Come and talk to Kensu. Another question here from Joseph, and he's asking if you can provide an example where data observability works best.
So there are many examples. So one example that I have is I'm going to go a little bit in the details of technique, right? So when you have this kind of ingestion layer, which is ingesting data from multiple places, and the data is coming from a different even companies you have no idea about, right? And you have this Spark job. So let's talk about Spark jobs, which is consuming the data and producing the data in certain pounds, and you have tens, 20 of these pipeline running in a continuous fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this data is actually being used into the data warehouse with SQL queries. It can be BigQuery. You have the queries being run on that, and then the data is being, if it's for BigQuery, then you would be, let's say, in the studio, right? Looker.
Right.
Where it works best is with a DOD, with a connector, with this vision, this visibility that we introduce within Spark, within BigQuery, within Looker, right? You will be able to understand which data which is injected into the Spark, which is read by the Spark application, is actually creating some problems in one of the report in Looker.
Mm-hmm.
Because the data coming from, I don't know, weather.com actually has not been as fresh as it used to be. Therefore, the forecast that you're doing on the tires selling is not accurate anymore, right? So you are actually, that's a true example, right? So you're creating some command of new tires, right? In SAP, which are ordered automatically, right? So you're buying tires for nothing, because actually the weather.com value was actually these are not the right names, right? So it was not the weather.com at that point, but because the data is not fresh anymore and it's automated, right? So how can you know? And as long as you're not injecting DOT, there is no way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very good, relevant example. So thank you for that. We have a question here in terms of when people are ready to take their first steps into their journey of data observability. What would be your advice on a couple good first steps?
Can I say talk to us, I guess?
You can say that, yeah.
So of course, talking to us. So we're open. So actually, we're delivering some content on that. I would say, but individually, just wait for a little bit, and then you will be able to experience the full benefits of it using the freemium version that will be out there. So we'll have examples, in different technologies in order to help you going through this. I would say read our blog, for instance. Wait a little bit for the report I'm going to write, and I would say more generally is think about your life as a data producer, data users, right? And think about examples, right? And what do you want to avoid? What different experience that you have been through, right? And that you want to avoid. And generally the first answer is, I want to focus on adding value, creating jobs and new application that will go in production and deliver value that my user will be happy about, right? So where am I spending time related to data observability that is forbidding me to doing this? Might it be checking the data in production or revamping some application because I'm not producing exactly the data that it's supposed to be or whatever.
Right.
So, create some awareness.
I think you make a very good point in saying, what do people want to do versus what do they want to avoid, right? Right away, I'm thinking you want to provide value to your end users, your stakeholders. You want to avoid delays. You want to avoid potential embarrassment of data's gone wrong, right? Data catastrophes. So I think that was very good. I know we do still have that one giveaway. So I want to do the giveaway, and then I have a quick follow-up question for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time. So guys, it's hashtag Kensu if you want to play. I'm going to share now. Okay. And congratulations again to Ivana. I'm going to draw again. And let's see who our second winner is. All right. Congratulations to Vedant. I'm going to follow up with you as well after the session. Thank you so much for participating. And so my question to you, Andy, is, and I see more hashtag Cansus are coming in now. It always happens once I announce winners, more people start playing. But you mentioned the freemium model, right? That's coming out at some point next year. So I'd love for you to just tell folks a little bit more about that, and where can they sort of follow you so they can stay on top of, when this actually comes out. I know you mentioned Twitter and some other places, but if there's any other method to stay in touch.
At the moment, these are the best ways to stay in touch, of course, talking to us and etc. But coming along with the freemium version, so we're going to create something. We're not sure yet. So to be honest, so around might it be Slack or Circle? So I have to say that you actually not yet convinced me to consider Circle, but it's a nice tool. So for who doesn't know it, probably you know because there is a Circle that you have opened. But I would say it's an interesting tool to consider. But I really want to have people, being in a position where they can talk about DOD also, right? Not only data observability, but really about what can we do with DOD, which is a new way of managing this thing. And that's why there will be this channel. I will not name any name anymore, where people can also engage themselves and ask questions and think about what could be a future evolution. Also, when this will be out, there is already a manifesto which is available on our website about that. I would love to have also people being involved in a manifesto in order to describe really what are the principles of that and what are the benefits. Pretty much like there is the manifesto for Agile. For the moment, for instance, the big principles are data observability has to be contextual, it has to be synchronized, and it has to be continuously validating. So these are the three principles so far as they work, but I would love to hear also from everyone.
Is awesome. Thanks. Is the manifesto published on your site somewhere yet?
Yeah. If you click on that on our website, it's actually our manifesto.
Okay, cool. So guys, if you have any input into Andy's manifesto, you know where to find him. Andy, I want to thank you very much. And by the way, Dustin says Circle is fantastic, just as a last second here. So he's in the dedicated circle. Hopefully soon there'll be a different channel community of whatever it is that you're looking to create, and hopefully you find the right platform for you guys. Yeah. But thank you so much for your session here today. I definitely learned quite a bit about data observability, and it was really nice to hear about the method that you've developed. I could see you're very passionate about this, even outside of the company. It seems like you really want to help people sleep better at night, better than babies. So thank you again, Andy, for the session, and I want to thank all of our guests for tuning in.
Thanks a lot, Kate. Thanks a lot. So that was a pleasure being here, and I love the questions. So anytime.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.